Okay, so recording started again. Thank you again. I thought you might all enjoy the voicemail that I got when I checked them between gigs here. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this, but I thought everybody might enjoy this as a voicemail. Let's see if we get it to play first. Go on, play.
We are closing your bank account because we found specious transaction from your bank account. For further information, press 1.
So I've got specious transactions. I didn't know I was buying and selling specious, but anyway, there you go. So this is, again, an illustration of the, unfortunately, the landscape. Users get confused. It sounds so. They panic. They play on the emotional side of it, and that's why we talked about, the first reaction versus the logical reaction. The first reaction, again, if you look at most people who do get scammed, it's typically their first reaction. They panic. The best practice is always going to be ask somebody else, get another opinion. Do you think this is true? Do you think this is correct? Before you go and take any action. All right, so let's go back through a couple of questions that have come in. So John's got a customer that is currently running local AD. Bad move, get rid of that. Run Azure AD. No need for local AD anymore. And workers getting access via a VPN. Again, bad move. Again, that should be eliminated as much as possible. They have business premium. That's a good thing. And the reality is how do they authenticate their legacy apps, right? So at the end of the day, legacy authentication is exactly that. This is where you're going to get more and more problems. So step one is you need to talk to the legacy app provider and get a roadmap to getting that out of, being dependent on a local AD. Right now, I know you can't do that overnight, but don't keep kicking the can down the road. Talk to the provider and say, when's this happening? When's this changing? When are you moving to modern authentication? When are you supporting SAML? When are you supporting all of these new protocols? If there's not a roadmap, time to potentially change supplier. Now, given that, again, you can't change overnight, all right? So, again, the legacy authentication is going to require NTLM, typically NTLM style, authentication. All right, so one of the options that you do have, if you do have Microsoft 365 Business Premium, is basically to use Azure AD App Proxy. All right, so the idea here is that you can set up a Azure AD portal, or you get an Azure AD portal into which you can embed all sorts of application on-prem and in the cloud. As well. So the idea is I log into this portal, myapps.microsoft.com, and then I can select on the apps that have been published in there, and these can potentially be on-prem as well using what's called the Azure AD App Proxy, which you would install on a local machine effectively as a gateway to provide those sort of credentials. So at the end of the day, it certainly is possible, but it's going to be rather messy. The other option is to look at moving those legacy servers into Azure directly and have them all accessed directly from Azure. And again, you can use something like, for example, Windows 365 to access those Windows-based Azure AD boxes that are obviously in Azure now. So there's lots of different ways to do it, right? It's messy, it's untidy. You really have to question why you're doing it that way. Legacy apps, you really should be looking at if there is not a pathway for that app to go to SaaS, like a totally cloud-based option, then you really need to consider whether you need to move apps, okay? Because it's just going to be a boat anchor going forwards and make it more and more difficult. In the short term, there are options like Azure AD App Proxy. There are site-to-site VPNs. There are moving Azure infrastructure, moving the infrastructure into Azure, Windows 365. So there are plenty of options. None of them will be simple, easy, or a click of a button, but they are an option. But the long-term thing is get it into a SaaS-based application. But remember that Microsoft 365 Business Premium includes Azure AD P1, which includes most of these features. So Farzad, that question that you're asking is I haven't come to Defender yet, right? So at the end of the day, the auditing is going to be available. You need to turn it on. Okay, so the portal will support that, but you need to turn on that capability inside the portal, but that's not something that I'm going to cover. Okay, so that can be audited, that can be complianced the way that you want it, but again, it's not something that we're going to cover here because this is at the enterprise end of the scale here. All right, any other questions? Let me have a look. Was that the only one? Yep, I think we're all good. Recording is on. That is excellent. And let us talk about DLP, data loss prevention. So the idea with DLP is it's designed to prevent the leakage of confidential information outside the organization. Okay, it is not, going to prevent anything coming into the organization. It is an outbound scanning technology, and it relies on scanning. It relies on search. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to scan, search, index the information, and it is going to look for sensitive information types. Now, those sensitive information types can be defined as a standard. Now, that standard could be a tax file number, driver's license, passport, any of that sort of information, or it can be information that you've defined. So maybe it's an invoice number, but at the end of the day, it has to be a sequence that can be identified in a search, okay, and on a regular basis. So if you've got consistent invoice numbers or patterns, then it can certainly go and locate those and pull those out for you. But at a base level, what you want to do is you basically want to be looking for the standard stuff. So that's going to be tax file number, Medicare number, driver's license, and passport, and they're provided by Microsoft in standard templates. So again, implement those, I would suggest, immediately. And the idea here is that you can also target where do you want to where do you want to apply that protection. So is DLP going to apply tenant wide? Is it going to apply per user? Is it going to apply teams and whatever? So you can target it again down to that individual level. Now, the other thing that we can also do is we can target DLP now or utilize DLP with devices, with our individual devices. Now, as mentioned, you do get a number of templates out of the box. And my advice is, and I'll show you, I would be implementing those immediately because they're already there, they're preset, and then you can have a look at. Now, the difference here is to stop and think about, right? So anything with P in it, DLP, AIP, MIP, has the word policy in it typically. So that means that somebody, a human being, needs to sit down and make a decision or come up with a set of rules to help define what that policy is about, what it can do, what it can't do, what its actions are going to be. So this is why the policies are generally not enabled by default. A human being needs to make a decision on what is the best for the organization. Now, they could be the best practices. Absolutely. Turn them on, away you go. But maybe they need customization. So if you think about the security journey or the security offerings you're making or potentially making to your customers, there is going to be an out-of-the-box options like turning on auditing, setting up alerts, doing DNS, doing the email filters, all the sort of stuff we've talked about already. That's the no-brainer. You should be doing out of the box as a best practice. The next level up is the policies. You know, what policies for Defender for Office 365? What policies for the amount of data you want to retain? Do you want to have the preservation hold on SharePoint? How long do you want your OneDrive to be maintained for? These require a decision from the business or consultation with the business. Same with DLP, right? So what makes sense for the organization? Now, DLP generally kicks in with mistakes. Most people accidentally send tax file numbers or accidentally send credit cards. Again, it's really to prevent that problem. Now, why is that an issue or why is that a threat? Because remember, our friends in government want you to prevent the breaching of customer data. They don't want customers' private data being exposed or accidentally exposed to other organizations who may or should not have access to it. So DLP is a very good way to put that in place so those sort of things can be prevented quickly and easily. And as the slide mentions, you've got to balance the productivity and the risk. You can't block the user from doing everything they need. So a very good example here is that DLP for most organizations, the 80% of organization makes sense. Tax file number, credit cards, Where it doesn't, or where it needs adjustment, let's say, is when you're talking to accountants, when you're talking to financial planners, because guess what? They're sending documents with tax file numbers as a requirement. They're sending numbers with identity in them. So that's where you may need to make an adjustment or work out a way to resolve that. Because they're still subject to the same rules, laws, but they're going to be dealing with a lot of this information, going to be far more common. Okay. So the idea here is that we have this capability built in. Microsoft 365 Business Premium and above has the DLP capability built into it. Lower plans do not. So again, we're talking Microsoft 365 Business Premium here as a beginning. Now, as mentioned, you've got the ability to go in and create the policies. We'll have a look at this, look at the reports and make judgments on these. And you can have as many policies as you want. You can target them at different locations or different storage vaults or buckets inside your organization. It doesn't have to be everything. And you can also get out, like I said, these nice reports and take advantage of these pre-canned policies, which we'll have a look at. So again, start with that. Start with what's already there as a point to get this thing up and running and see the impact that it will basically have in the environment. We'll have a look at this shortly. You've also got the ability to have, to do monitoring and for the system to make recommendations. It's like, oh, there goes another tax file number. Oh, there goes another credit card number. This is a bad thing. So again, you've got these sort of capabilities because the machine intelligence, the AI is able to, discern that pretty straightforwardly. And again, the way we set this up is to do it in a web interface, follow the bouncing ball, use a wizard, especially to start things off, so that you understand all the options that are basically available to you. Now, can you do this in PowerShell? Absolutely. So the way to do it, if you're smart, is you set it up in the web interface and then you run PowerShell to extract those rules and then you regurgitate them and re-import them into the next tenant. So rinse and repeat sort of thing. Now you can get quite granular here with DLP, and this is again a bit of a specialty. It's like, okay, well, I'm looking for an invoice number and it's going to be this followed by a dash followed by this. How confident are we of those numbers? So there is quite a lot of granularity in here if you want to get into the, down in the weeds with all this sort of stuff. But again, I caution you to make sure that you've got the top stuff or the obvious stuff covered off before you decide to descend into the weeds. Again, you get very confusing very quickly. So again, keep it simple to start off with. And as mentioned, there are lots and lots of options, and we'll have a look at some of these just to give you an idea of this. But this is sort of the experience in a nutshell here. So you'll see the top on the left there, I've got a file and I'll show you this exact file. It is a file, an Excel spreadsheet that contains credit cards. That has been identified by DLP because I've specified a policy to look at my OneDrive for Business and indicate whether those files have confidential information. Some of that is credit cards. And you'll see I get a little red indicator on the left there over the file icon telling me that there's something wrong. The company has identified something. Now, when I look at that in a little bit more detail, I get what's below it there. I say access to this item is blocked. It conflicts with a policy. All right, so there's a policy that's tripping this up. I get another warning. And then if I try and share it, or if I have a look at what the settings actually are, I can get this more information. Now, on the more information there, you'll see it tells me that it's a credit card policy. But down the bottom, you'll see that you get the option to report the issue or override it. So again, this is all something that you can configure when you set up the policy. It's like, okay, are you going to allow users to report, no, this is wrong, please make change, this document should be allowed out? And also, are you going to allow people or certain people inside your organization to be able to say, no, I really need to send this, here's the reason why, and audit and track that capability. All right. So again, at the end of the day, you have all of that, and it's driven by policy, and policy has to be created by someone with technical knowledge and with business knowledge as well. So we go into the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. As you see here, this is our overview page. So you see here that we can start monitoring on sensitive types. We can turn the policy on to do that monitoring as we talked about. So why don't I try and turn this on and let's see what happens. It'll probably take 50 minutes. I won't be able to get back to the screen. Oh, here we go. Has been turned on. There we go. So if we now have a look at the policies that I have in play here, so you'll see that I have the Australian Credit Card, Financial Data, Privacy Act, PII, and a policy for Teams. So to create a policy, again, we just follow the bouncing ball. Here is where I can select my template. So let us go in here and narrow it down to Australia. So you'll see there are 2 Australian financial templates for DLP, and when they are in play, they are looking for a SWIFT code, which is a banking code, tax file number, bank account number, and a credit card number. I look at the DSS number here, credit card number. If I look at medical, it's going to look for Medicare, the medical account number. Look at my privacy. So it will show you basically what it's looking for. Now, of course, I can go in and create a custom policy if I so choose. So let's go and just show you what the differences are when we do go to a custom policy. So again, these are the locations in which I want it to apply. Is it going to apply to my Exchange email, to my SharePoint sites, to my OneDrive, to my Teams and chat? So again, the idea here is we can block or we can prevent people sharing credit cards inside chat in Teams. So if you deem credit cards, tax file numbers, whatever to be sensitive, you can block them from being discussed in Teams. And you'll see here, I've also got the capability potentially to do on-prem repositories as well. So let's go next. Policy settings. All right, so we can create or customize the DLP rules here. And again, go next. Right, and we would go in here and create the rule. So the rule will be, let's just call this rule 1. And let's add a condition. So let's say the content contains, I don't know, hello world, whatever that is. And then we can keep adding, all these content contains. We can have exceptions. So obviously, we don't want it if it has the action. So let's go in and create, action. We can CC people. We can prepend an email subject. So let's put in here DLP. So that'll put it in the front of the subject so we know, what's happening there. Do we want to notify our users? Okay, so we do want to notify our users that they're potentially having an issue with this policy. Do I want to notify these people as well? All right, so again, do I want to notify the owner of a SharePoint site, customize the email text? You bad person. So again, you can customize this to your heart's content. We allow user override. So that was that option that I showed you. The user can say, no, I have to send this out. And you can require a business justification. So they have to fill in a field and say why that they want to override that. And again, you can also set that to automatically be tagged as a false positive if they do that. You'll see here that we can also send an alert. So we can send an alert when somebody, creates or it fails this DLP policy. And we can determine, how many matches, maybe we want a volume of only 15 matches in a minute or whatever. We can control that, or in 60 minutes. So if there are less than 15 matches, we're not going to worry about it. But if there is, 15 or more in over 60 minutes, in a period of 60 minutes, then we want to, take this action. Again, we can notification for admins. You want to know the name of the person, the type of data, additional options, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So once we've done all that, let's just, hopefully it'll allow us to save it. Context sensitivity type. Okay. What have I got here? What have I got here? Any of these? Can I? Content contains, let me see if I can change this. No, I can't. All of these. Okay. If you specify all of these content, okay, so let's try sensitivity info type. Let's pick the ABA, go okay, and try saving again. Will it allow me to save? Maybe I've got to fill something. Oh, no, here we go. It's validating it. Validating. Bing. Okay, so now let's move on. So you'll see that you can test the policy out first. That's probably the best option here is test it before enforcing it. We can turn it on right away or we can turn it off. Okay, so I'll leave it to be tested and go next, and then I review my settings, and then I would then basically apply that. Okay. So let us have a look at the policies that are in place. So the credit card policy is here. All right, so you'll see that it's looking for Exchange, OneDrive, it's looking for credit cards, okay, and it will take appropriate actions here. We can edit the policy, delete the policy, export it, and all that sort of stuff. We've now got the alerting capability as well, so any of the alerts that were generated. So like I said, if you've set it up so that it will generate an alert, good move. And here's our endpoint DLP. So we can set it up for our Windows devices, our allowed devices, our Bluetooth apps, our browser. So you can set up DLP even inside browsers these days once you've got Intune and Endpoint Manager in play here, right? So there's this extremely powerful capability down to the device level. And we can do an activity, explorer to see what's been happening, in our environment. But let me show you what this actually looks like. So let me go to my OneDrive. So imagine I'm now a user, an average run-of-the-mill user, if there ever is such a thing. Here is that file here called credit cards or C cards. So if you go over it, you'll see here I've got a notification that contains sensitive information. Some commands aren't available. So if I go to the policy tip to see what's that all about, you'll see here it says it contains a credit card information. That's why it's been flagged. And I can now report that as an issue. Say, no, it doesn't. It's not actually a credit card. It's some other number. And I can override that if I do want to, for example, send that or share that with somebody else. Now, all of that interaction, if I do go ahead with that, would be recorded in the admin area here, would be in the reporting area. So I think it's what we want to do is, where did compliance go? There it is. So if we go into, this is security. Let's go back here. So the idea would be is we'd be able to look at the overview. We'd be able to see the top activities detected. We'll be able to get reports, graphics. So as a best practice, out of the box, and again, I'm talking Microsoft 365 Business Premium and above, I would suggest that you should deploy as a baseline, without even thinking about it, DLP, the 4 Australian standard DLP policies, so financial data, privacy data, PII, and the other one, whichever I can't remember, and then you would set it to report only mode. And then you would revisit the client within the next 30 days, look at the reports and say, look, did you realize that all of this information is leaving the organization and some of it may constitute a breach-worthy event? And then you can have a discussion with the customer and say, look, okay, we can lock this down, we can screw it down, we can give you more information. This is the idea is to show the customer the value of DLP first in protecting their information, okay, and then looking to extend that to other, custom attributes or custom confidential information inside the organization, right? So my advice to you would be to implement it for the 4 standard Australian templated plans. So if we go into policy, go into Australia, as I indicated, so there's 2 financial plans, 1 medical, 1 privacy, 2 privacy, so there are 5. So go in and basically implement all of those, set them to monitor or report only, and then review that with the customer after a period of time, and then use that as a consulting opportunity to go and have a word to them about that. Now, one of the other things that is technically classified as DLP, which is sort of hidden and is moving around a bit, and I'll show you this, is the DLP document fingerprinting. So the idea with this is that you take a standard document, a template. So think an invoice template. So if you've got a template for an invoice you use, you could upload that as an example of, hey, if I see this style of document heading outside the organization, basically, take these actions. Now, when it is detected, you'll see here that you can set it up that, the user isn't authorized to send this style of document or a document matching the fingerprint outside the organization. You'll see you get nice little warnings around all that information. Now, as mentioned, it is a little bit, I'm not sure if it's in the new portal yet. So what I'm going to do here is, let me go to the admin center, and by the magic of some clicks here, the first thing you want to do is go into the Exchange portal. So by default, I think it'll take me to the, let's see, it'll take me to the new portal. Yep, that's what I expected. Okay. Now, if we scroll down the bottom here, you've got an option that says Classic Exchange Admin Center. So if we select that, that'll take you back to the year 2000-ish and revert you back to the old console where that DLP option, the DLP fingerprinting option, will be available to you. So they're going to want you to move to the new one. But if we go to protection, I think it's, no, maybe it's compliance management, beg your pardon. Compliance management, what we'll find in there is an option for DLP, data loss prevention. There it is. And we can go through the document fingerprinting capabilities here. So we select that. That will then bring this up. We can then upload a document. You'll see that I've already put one in there, the invoice one, which is the example you saw on the slides. So I can add a document in there, fingerprint it, and apply it. Now, from everything that I can see, this is currently still only in the old Exchange portal. I haven't heard anything about it moving to the new portal. It may be in there. I haven't had a look of late. So again, that is also available for you as well if you want to go in and have a play with that and utilize that as an option, because it still is available. Now, as mentioned, it's going to give you this capability to produce these sort of reports, and if you want, you can export them to Power BI or Excel to get more information. You can automate that sort of process as well. We can also set up the capability to do investigation if you want, and this is the benefit of doing a lot of this integration. So we can now potentially, if someone, trips a DLP policy, then we can trip an automated process that goes out and does whatever you need to do to verify and to check and to tell managers and all that sort of stuff. So all of that is available to you. And of course, like I said, if you want to, you can set up DLP alerts. So if somebody does fail a DLP policy, if you want, you can receive an email alert. My advice, as always, is to turn the alert on, but let something like MCAS, Cloud App Security, or Sentinel be your alerting engine to do that. And we can drill down to the individual incident if you want. You can get very low-level details on the DLP. So the best practices recommendation for DLP is, get started today. Turn on all the templates, but set them to report only. Okay, like I said, put them in audit mode first, see what they do, see what's turning up. You can be very surprised. It is very surprising to see what can turn up. Turn on the email incident reports so you'll know that you'll get an email that those things are happening in the environment. And if you want to know what the sensitivity types are, okay, so you want to know, what's the definition of Australian passport, what's the definition of Australian Medicare, you'll find it at that link there, aka.ms/DLP sensitivity type. So there is a definition that Microsoft maintains of those if you want to go and have basically have a look in there. So when we've got all this set up, as you saw with the practical example, you get policy tips. It's connected to Office on the desktop. So again, another big plus for the integration factor here is they'll get warnings in email, they get warnings in the web, they get warnings on their mobile, they get warnings in their Office documents. It's pretty hard to miss. All right, so we're covering all these sort of bases off. And as mentioned, here's an example of sort of reports. You can see, which policies failed, which policy hasn't. And like I said, set it to report. Come back in 30 days or review the reporting after 30 days, go and have a discussion with your customer. And I think you'll find there's quite a lot of information in there that they aren't aware is leaking outside the organization. Now, the direct business pain point that DLP solves is for the national data breach legislation. So the national data breach legislation says no tax file numbers, no Medicare numbers, outside the organization effectively, and we can use DLP to solve this. DLP is included with Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Take advantage of it, turn it on, and use that as a selling point for your customers. All right, so that sort of covers off what I want to talk about when it comes to DLP. Are there any questions on any of that before we move on to the next discussion point? Any questions from anybody? I'll wait a moment or two, wet my whistle here. See how we're going. Let's go in and have a look here. Where are we up to in our decks? So we talked about DLP. Where are we? Here we are. Yep, okay. So we seem to be pretty much on track. Let me just power up a virtual machine. I don't see any questions coming through. Start my VM here. Okay. So let us talk now about Azure Information Protection. So think of Azure Information Protection as a way to provide permissions on an individual data item, typically a file, and for those permissions to be embedded inside the document, okay? One of the limitations of a file server typically is that you can put data and information inside a protected bucket. So think of a file server, think of a folder in a share. You can protect that folder with permissions. You can protect an item in a server with individual permissions. But the problem is, if somebody with permissions takes that item and moves it or copies it out of that protected bucket, the permissions are removed. The permissions do not follow the data item. They are not attached to the data item. They are attached to the bucket. So again, if we move a protected file off a file server to a local share, it's no longer protected because the permissions do not follow the item. So Azure Information Protection does provide that. So the idea here is this is probably for the most sensitive information inside an organization. Okay, so this is if you want to protect, for example, the the CVs of people, if you want to protect their HR records, if you want to protect the super secret Area 51 report, that's what this is designed for. It's not designed for every single piece of data across the whole organization, right? At least initially, it's designed for the most critical and sensitive pieces of information inside the organization, okay? So the idea is that it uses technology that is based on what's called information rights management, IRM. This has been around for a long time. Microsoft did it on-prem. It's one of the few organizations in the world that can now do this at scale in the cloud. And they do so using what's called Azure Information Protection. Now, when you have Azure Information Protection in play, you will see a banner or you'll see the additional options available in Word, and I'll show you this once the VM's spun itself up. It will basically then allow you to apply a protection policy to that item directly from Word, Excel, PowerPoint, or whatever, okay? Again, AIP. P for policy. That means some human being needs to sit down and make decisions and interface the business need to the technology need. Okay, someone needs to set up a policy and understand the business requirements, right, for the organization and translate that effectively into a business discussion here. Okay. So excuse me while I just log into this quickly while we're moving on to the next slide. Just a sec, and that will then spin up. Now I have to have a think here. It's not Friday afternoon. It's not a good time period for me to try and remember the password. I might have managed to do that successfully. Oh, it looks good, doesn't it? Okay, so we'll let that spin up in the background and continue on. So the idea is, as mentioned, is the protection will follow the document, whether it's inside the organization or sent anywhere. So the idea is let's have a think about this. If we protect our HR documents with Azure Information Protection, we set a policy that says HR documents cannot move outside the organization. Now, we could do that with DLP, but we need to be able to identify those documents some way. So let's say that all the CVs are slightly different font, different typeface. That's not going to work with DLP. With AIP, we can put that protection on the individual document so that when the document, if the document is sent for some reason as an attachment outside the organization, it cannot be read. It cannot be opened. They will receive a file, but they will not be able to open it. They can't view the contents because it is encrypted. So that is the example of protecting corporate information from getting or being utilized outside the organization. The second option is let's think about a quote. So you guys do quotes for customers. What's one of the challenges when people do quotes? Well, typically, bad customers, let's call them, they will take your quote and they will send it to another supplier to get a comparison of your prices versus something else. How many people have had that happen? Everybody's hands up. I can see that because it's happened to us all. Well, imagine the scenario where you protect your quote with Azure Information Protection and the permissions that you use on that document only permit the user, the person receiving it, to open the file and read the file. They can't change it, they can't edit it, they can't forward it, they can't print it, they can't copy and paste it. That's example number 2 of the control that you can have. The third option that I'll consider is, what about a situation where you produce a price list or a monthly sales guide? You want that to be sent to as many people as possible, but after 30 days, you don't really, that information is not valid. So again, we can also put expiry on our documents. So even if they are out and they're usable after a nominated time period, nominated date, those files then are no longer accessible. So there's 3 examples of how you could use Azure Information Protection. So the idea is you can apply this to your emails. Okay, so you can apply Azure Information Protection to emails. You can apply it to documents. You can protect against data leaks, accessible information, and we can also use it, as we've indicated, to protect these archives as well. So the idea here is you've got lots of data, sales data, banking details, corporate accounts. But take a step back, as I keep telling, is think about your own organization. Where are the crown jewels? Where is the stuff that you don't want to escape? So in an organization, what's generally the last thing a bad salesperson does before they jump ship and go to another organization? They copy all the sales data, don't they, onto a USB or to their Gmail, and then they walk out the door. That's possible in your organization. You know, again, you could have a poor employee who decides to copy all your IP, take it with them and provide it to another organization that they're moving to. Is that unethical? 100%. But that doesn't stop it happening. So again, sit back, have a think about what information is your crown jewels and how well protected is that information. All right, so I've got a question from Robert. After DLP was deployed, some reports were available, such as DLP match, Then I requested the CSV file for each report. However, the data in these files showed the same. Please let me know what I did miss. Well, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I don't know what you selected, what you do, and how you did it. I'm sure there is a reason why. My advice to you is, and my advice to everybody is, if you have any questions or any issues or strange things like that, log a support ticket with Microsoft or Ingram. It doesn't cost you anything, right? Go and ask the question, or look at the Microsoft documentation, or look at YouTube or whatever. The solution is out there, as they say. And again, you've got a lot of people on your side. You've got Microsoft, you've got Ingram, you've got, YouTube, you've got your search engines. Start there, okay, and break it all down. It's all going to be a learning process. I can't give you a finger on, oh, you should have clicked this and not this, and look at this. I just don't know. A policy is something that is created And without seeing the whole thing and getting the whole background, I'm not going to be well versed and available to give you a decent answer to that. So here we are in my desktop. I am going to run Word. So let me go in and run Word for you here. Give it a second to spin itself up here. Talk among yourselves. Come on. I think I need to upgrade this VM, it would seem. Here we go. Yes, I think I'm going to upgrade this to using SSDs rather than the cheap and cheerful mechanical disks. It just shows you how low the mechanical. You'll see it loading the information protection option here. So it's actually that's the sort of the plugin or the capability that's been added to this desktop. Here we go. So let's open a blank document. Yes, I think I need to upgrade this for demo machine. Come on. Probably doing updates in the background. That's probably what it's doing. After I should have powered this up earlier. My fault. Yep, that's probably what it's doing. Okay, so here we are finally at our document. So you'll notice a couple of differences here. Firstly, here's this additional button up the top here. Right, so take a note of test and CI ops there. Okay. You'll also notice this bar has now appeared again with test and CI ops here. So what I'm going to do as a user, I'm going to create the world's most important and interesting document. Okay, now if I look at the file properties back here, look at the info, you'll see firstly that the document has no protection by default. Now I can manually go in here and set up individual permissions if I so choose. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button here, which effectively applies, as you see, an information protection policy. Okay, it's going to apply Azure information protection to my document. And again, you'll see here that it has done a couple of things. It's put a header. It has also put a watermark in there. And it has also put in a footer. Now, not only that, if I go back to my document here and look at my info, you'll see this is now a protected document. So it now has this custom policy applied to it. Now, if I want to change that, I can go edit, right? And I could, unprotect it and it would go back to the way it was. But again, I can also apply this test policy. All right. So it's as simple as that in Office style documents. Now, what about non-Office documents? What about ones that don't support this new capability? Well, let us go and find a document somewhere, maybe this PowerShell script. Okay, so you'll see here, I think I might have to go to the actual location. So let me go to my, what have I got? Hopefully I've got nothing embarrassing in my downloads. Let's have a look. So if I right mouse click on this, where is it? Okay, maybe it doesn't like this either. Try. No, all right, so what I'm gonna have to do is let me go to my downloads. I don't think it likes those shortcuts. Let me go to downloads, open that up. And I prefer a text file, so let's go text file, okay. Why isn't it showing? So normally what we would see here should be a capability to protect the document directly from the Internet Explorer, from Windows Explorer. So there should be an option here that allows the protection. For some reason, it's not displaying. Don't know why that is, but I'll try this once more. But it is integrated with the Windows Explorer, so you can go in and basically find any other file that you want, right mouse click on it, and then it will pop up a wizard to run you through to protect it. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to have added that to the menu. I apologize for that, but you'll just have to take my word that there is a capability to set up permissions for the non-Office documents as well in the operating system. Now, the question is okay, where does all this get set, where do all these policies largely come from. So again, if we power up the Windows environment, okay, so let's power up the environment here. There's no need to apologize. Hi. Again, my advice to you is if you want to wait until towards the end of today, if we've got any time in Q&A, I can go in and do a little bit of research for you. So there's no need to apologize. It's a good question, but unfortunately, I just can't. Oops, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go and have a look at compliance. So let's go back to our compliance area. So again, same tenant. Let's go in here and have a look at our protection policies. Hopefully it won't want to take, yes, it will. It's gonna, don't tell me it's gonna, no. What's it gonna do here? Let's go into our policies here. Okay, so you'll see in our policies here, we've got our data loss, we've got our retention, and our access policies and things as well. So let's go in and just show you data loss. Oh, we looked at data loss prevention, didn't we? Sorry, my mistake. Actually, it's under information protection, my mistake. So the idea here is that we look at what's known as labeling. All right, so if we look at our words, so remember the banner across the top that had test and CIA ops, think of that as the label. So when this comes up here, you'll see that there are hopefully a number of existing labels. And basically all a label does, so let me just show you what it looks like, display name, what it does, description, the scope, it doesn't like that. Why doesn't it like that? I've got to put the display name. Test. Description for users is test. And go next, maybe it likes that, there we go. So where's it going to apply this scope? Along emails, along groups and sites, and also Azure Purview, but let's just stick to files and emails. This policy, what's it going to do? Is it going to encrypt the files and email? And is it also going to mark the content? So it's going to put the headers and the footers. So we'll select both of those, which we saw. And now it's going to say, okay, what encryption settings do you want? All right. So here we would go in and assign the permission. So we can do that manually as part of the policy, or we can allow the users to do it on the fly. But what I'm going to do is I'll go down the bottom here and you'll see I can assign the permission. So I can now say, okay, all users and groups in my organization, that's that first scenario I talked about. I want everybody in my organization to have access to this document, do whatever they want, but nobody outside. Or do I want authenticated users? So remember, authenticated users they authenticate against your Azure AD. So that will include internal users plus Azure B2B users. So what they call external users in Azure. Users and groups, and you'll notice the bottom one here is I can specify an email address or domain. So if I'm targeting this as a quote or a policy to put on a quote to send to a unique person, I would input their email address, or if I'm sending it to a group of people, their domain here. Okay, so I go in and put those permissions. So let's go in here and put that, and I will put in, what's a good one? So director_CIA@hotmail.com. That shows you how old I am. I still got a Hotmail account. Go add, and now I can go in and select those individual permissions. So do I want the author to do I want the person that I'm sending to, director_@hotmail, to be able to co-author, to be able to review, view, or custom? So let's go custom. We'll say, okay, I'm going to allow you to view, but you can't edit, you can't save, you can't print, you can't extract, you can reply, you can't forward, you can't edit the rights, you can't export, and whatever. So again, save. All right, so these are now the permissions that specific user, right, will have access to. So that's how I set the permissions. Here is where I can set when the content expires. So I can say, you know what, you can have it till Saturday. After Saturday, even though you could access it on Friday, you can't access it on Saturday. So I have an expiry date set on it. Now, one of the common questions is though, what happens if I can't get access to the internet and I'm in a submarine? Well, the idea here is you can now determine that, okay, if you can't get to the internet for a period of days and you nominate, let's say 7 days, that means that as long as you log in or you can access the internet within that 7-day period, it will check and validate, blah, blah, blah. And then it's good for another 7 days. And then you have to, if you want to open it, after that 7 days, you'll have to have the internet connection to allow it. So you can, again, expire the content, basically. All right, let's go next. You'll see here we can do the content marking. So that's where we go in and say, you know, you want the watermark, you want the header, you want the footer. So that was what you saw when my document came up. You can customize that to suit your, okay, so it wants me to go in and customize that. So I'll turn that off because that'll take too long, but you get the idea there. And I can also do auto labeling. Now, the caveat here is to do auto labeling, which means it looks at the content of the file and then makes a decision about what how to label that file. It needs Azure Information Protection P2, which is not part of Microsoft 365 Business Premium, but part of E5. So if you want auto labeling, you need the more advanced options. So again, I'll leave that off. You can do that manually with Business Premium, but you can't do the auto labeling unless you've got a more advanced license. Again, data protection for groups and sites, Azure Purview if you want, and then off you would go, excuse me, and finish that process. So let's see if that, let's go back here and see if I can bring up my policies. And then basically you will see the list of policies here, and that is effectively the policies you will see in that banner. Here they are, finally. So down the bottom here, you will see that here's the, bit hard to see at the bottom, but here's the CIA Ops one that I clicked on in my Word document. And you'll see in the settings here, I've got encrypted, I've got watermarked, I've got no auto labeling, it's file and email and so on. So all I do then is take that policy and roll it out to the organization and determine whether the users or which audience they can apply it. And again, they can apply it to their emails, they can apply it to their documents per the policy that I've got here. And the way that I do that is I just go there and, again, publish, what they call publish the label. So I create the label, and then I would publish it to, you know, my users and my groups. Now, one of the questions is, well, why are we doing labels and then publishing them? Because you need to think about labels as doing potentially two things. They can do protection, okay, but they can also do what's called retention. Okay, so one of the, remember we talked about the preservation hold library in SharePoint? That's a retention policy. So you set up a retention policy, apply it to your SharePoint site, and it creates that preservation library. A label allows you to combine a protection label, right, to limit who has access, and a retention label together. So you can have a label that is retention only, you can have a label that is a protection only, or you can have a label which is both. So that's the concept of labeling, and that's a sort of an enterprise-y thing where it's like you're tagging your data, okay, for retention, for protection, or for both. Now, these sort of labels, especially the information labels, can also be surfaced in SharePoint. So you can protect a SharePoint document library site with these policies, and also have them as drop-down menus potentially in your list items for individual files. So there's quite a lot of power in what this can potentially do. And some of that power, let's just get to a point here where we can take a break. You can do that with your emails. So you do get a capability to encrypt with the default options out of the box, but you can also apply those protection labels as well. So if you create a custom policy for emails, you can allow users to select that as well if you want. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on email encryption. It's pretty straightforward, and it is included in there. And again, how much stuff have I got here on labeling? Yeah, there's a little bit here. So what I will do, how about I've jumped the gun a little bit there. I'm sorry for that. So what I will do is I will find Mr. Clock, or I'll assign the clock over here, get it ready to fire for another 10-minute break as we are at the top of the hour. And I do want to keep people fresh, and ask if there are any other questions before we do take a break. Are there any questions on that? We'll come back and talk a bit more about labeling. I'm sorry that I didn't cover that off. I jumped the gun there a little bit. We'll run through that just to round it off. Are there any other questions, DLP, any of that stuff before we take a break? I need to wait probably a little bit longer because it seems that we take a break, we get lots of questions. Waiting. Just see if there are any questions. Doesn't seem to be. All right, so what I'll do is I will stop the recording as always.